Hi, I'm Miko Aliño from GAIA Asia Pacific, and this is a pre-recorded session for Trash Heroes Zero Waste Communities Training Round 2. For this session, we'll cover why waste separation is important in cities and communities. So what's the problem with waste? Something that we throw every day, we generate every. It's quite challenging task to produce no waste in a day. So these are the things that we throw because it's no longer useful to us. So we try to get rid of it by putting it in a waste bin or burying it in our compost facilities for kitchen waste, for example. And because of our I guess our consumption patterns and the growing population and other factors, this is of course, a problem for a lot of cities. You have uh, lack of facilities or infrastructure for waste management that leads to congested landfills. You have open burning, and some of the waste leak into the environment. Either they end up in rivers, in oceans, or ingested by animals. And some of this plastic also end up in our bodies, so either through drinking water or the food we eat. So for now, it's the health impacts for humans is at least it's still being studied, but the fact that it's already inside our bodies, so there's a potential impact eventually in the future once data is available. The problem of waste management, or in this case, congested landfills, we've seen this in a lot of occasions in a lot of cities where there are actually garbage slides that in the case of Bandung, for example, 157 people died back in 2005. So it was an eye opener, not just for Bandung city government, but one of our members, YPBB. So it made them to rethink the way they handle or approach these types of waste management uh, programs or solutions. And actually, in Indonesia, this day or this February 21, it's being commemorated as National Waste Awareness Day, just to at least remind people about the need or the urgency to properly handle our waste, not just putting them everything in a waste bin or dumping them in the environment. And throwing waste, even we put it in a waste bin, it's a not a simple problem. So even though we try to keep our place clean, we try to do our general cleaning every other day or so, or for others might be more frequent. This waste ends up somewhere. So it ends up in landfills or in affected communities. It ends up in waterways that in a way may cause flooding and other impacts that may harm our human health. So there's when you throw away waste, away is actually somewhere. It's not something that magically disappears. And because of that complex problem, we need a way or an approach to uh, rethink this waste problem. And I think in the previous round, you've learned about zero waste as an approach to um, maximize the amount of waste that we try to recover, either through refusing them, composting, reusing, and making sure that we're not creating waste in the first place. So, in this slide, just showing you that most of the waste management systems are in a way stacked in a pyramid where most of our waste end up in disposal sites. In a zero waste system, what we try to do is to make sure that we minimize the amount of waste that we send to landfills by introducing these concepts. So zero waste looks like this. I think you've seen this in the the previous training where we just serving this as a recap or refresher, looking at the items that we can actually return to the system, either through composting or sending them to waste banks or to the manufacturing sector, and looking at the types of waste that we can actually uh, do something about. So, for example, the waste that are destined to landfills. So, what can we do about them? We need to look for ways on how to uh, invest in product redesign, maybe talk to the government. What are the things that need to be banned? Uh, Implement EPR policies. So, when companies will become more accountable to the plastic waste and other things that they produce, and also look for investments or opportunities to introduce alternative delivery systems. And the question also, what to separate? Probably you've heard about the story from Japan, from Kamikatsu. It's a small town in Japan where they sort their waste in 45 categories. And imagine for people to actually sort doing that type of separation in Manila, in Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and other Southeast Asian cities, it's I think unimaginable. So the idea of actually making sure that you have these types of waste separation programs is making sure that we try to uh, maximize again the amount of waste that we can recover, and making sure that some items do not end up in landfills, especially organic waste. So going back to the problems in Southeast Asia, you see the problems of congested landfills, and you also have leakage since landfills can no longer accommodate a lot of waste. Then this municipal waste end up somewhere, either in rivers, in oceans, or just strewn over in open fields. So sometimes uh, people in a way rely also on open burning just to make sure they get rid of this waste. And in Southeast Asia, you see that a lot of our waste is actually made up of organic material. So this is something that we can actually already do. It can be easily processed either through composting, and then you also have opportunities to manage it either through at the household level or the community or at the district or city level. And by making sure that we deal with the most dominant organic material or waste stream in our municipal waste, then we can already reduce the contamination of other materials, especially recyclable waste. So it can already fetch a higher price in terms of selling them in waste markets. Just to give you an example, so here's the situation in Bandung in Indonesia, where um, there's no separation happening. So YPBB decided, okay, we'll start with a simple separation scheme. So at least people would get an introduction on how to separate their waste. So instead of doing 45 categories or 6 categories, they decided just to work on two, on organic waste and other waste. So that's the I think this is an initial or first step for them, and then eventually work on the other types as soon as other people or most of the residents already understand the concept. And just going back, why do we need to sort organic? So first, it helps us bring back nutrients to our soils. So of course, we use soil or this dirt to bring nourishment into the food that we eat, especially vegetables and fruits. And then second, you also have the offsetting of greenhouse gas emissions. So um, if we try to avoid the sending organic waste to landfills, then we're able to avoid the unnecessary greenhouse gas emissions, especially methane, being produced when you just let it sit in a landfill or a dump site. And then third, it also, in a way, increases the value of dry waste, especially recyclables. So if recyclables are not contaminated with organic waste, then they can be sold at a higher price in waste markets and scrap shops. So the question now is really not about the categories, but what types of waste to separate. So in the case of Bandung in Indonesia, so they thought of uh, focusing on one waste stream, which is organic waste, which if you already can do something about that, then you're already addressing 50 to 60% of your waste problem. And I think for this case, it's important for waste implementers or implementers in Bandung, for example, to understand the uh, population in your neighborhood or your community. And in this case, just to give you an example about um, paper, for example, you can consider this as organic because it's made out of natural material. But people would actually think that paper is also recyclable because they've heard about recycled paper. So it's really um, trying to look for ways on how to communicate these things better, and sometimes using the standard terms such as biodegradables and non-biodegradables. Um, for others, you need to look for creative ways to communicate this. That's why in the previous poster from Japan, we put pictures aside from the labels so people would understand what are the types of weight that need to be put in this specific type of category. Okay, so to understand at least this setup, so after doing the simple organic waste and other waste, as long as people already understand these things, then they can move on to a more complex or complicated type of categorization. So for organic waste, you can further separate that between garden and food waste. And then for other waste, you can already pick out the recyclables, which collectors can sell in waste markets. And then you also have your other waste types, such as hazardous waste, that are sent for further treatment or disposed in landfills. So to just give an illustration on how these things work. So as part of the communication with the residents or households, instead of just using biodegradable, so in this case, YPBB uses um, visuals or certain items such as twigs or leaves, so which is more clear or understandable for residents. So for special waste, for example, there's a description that this particular bin or category is for diapers and sanitary pads. And so the uh, waste separation program in Bandung happens this way. So for residents, since it's a continuous learning process to understand waste separation for them. For now, it's still organics and other types of waste. And then further down the ladder, you have your collectors already recovering the recyclables so that they can sell them in scrap shops. And then in MRFs, it's now in a way responsible for residual waste and other materials that are brought to landfills. So you see the X mark, which means that these are the things that at least this MRF or the transfer stations no longer have to deal with. So for example, in this chart, there's an assumption or expectation from households or communities to already handle the organic waste so that these waste types are no longer collected by waste collectors. So more questions about in when to actually move in terms of waste separation. I think the key here is making sure that people are part of education programs. And while it's ideal to introduce more waste categories to minimize contamination, it may also confuse people and or other people that are in a way um, practicing waste sorting very efficiently, but their waste collector is not. So when you see someone or the collector mixing certain types of waste, then you might just get frustrated with what you're already doing. So it's important for all of these stakeholders to understand the particular waste separation scheme that's being introduced and see if they um, will be ready for the next step or the next stage in terms of separation. And looking at again at the waste composition chart, we see that by handling the organic waste as well as the recyclables, cities in Indonesia and in a lot of places in Southeast Asia, they can uh, already recover at least 70% of the waste. Um, and going back to the diagram earlier about zero waste, so this is really the dominant part of the majority of our waste, which can be composted and recycled. The rest, we can also deal with them with introducing certain policies that either regulate, ban, or maybe consider other ways of distributing products. Okay, so why do we need to separate at source? Here are some reasons. First, mixed waste. Again, similar to the reason for organics, it it uh, it decreases the quality of materials that should be recycled. So, if you're able to separate recyclables, making sure that they're not contaminated um, with organic waste, then you increase the value. Then you can there's a higher likelihood that you can sell them in waste markets. Second, it's also a way to decongest our waste facilities. In Bandung, for example, the current uh, waste or transfer stations or waste management facilities can only accommodate 40% of the total waste of the city. So by making sure or looking at ways to manage it at source, at home or close to within your neighborhood or community, then we're in a way helping the government decongest or making sure that we're able to efficiently use these resources. Next is making sure or ensuring the safety of our waste collectors and by making sure that waste is properly labeled and separated, then we are able to make sure that waste collectors are in a way being protected, not being in a way exposed to certain contamination, for example, for hazardous waste or coming from organic waste. And finally, I guess this is the main uh, key factor for a lot of cities is really the economic cost. So for cities or communities that embrace this type of approach, then or actually even just focus on waste separation, then cost would actually decrease. So this chart came from YPBB. So they tried to analyze and provide some figures to the city, so to show that by waste separation, the city can actually uh, decrease its waste management costs, and they can reinvest it in other facilities and infrastructure, or look at or increase or improve other public services. All right. Thanks for listening.